It's a Golden Road TV show. Well, bridging the past with today for a better tomorrow.
Golden Road explores the intersection of arts, environment, culture, health, peace, justice, science, and technology, paving the road for positive social change.
It's a Golden Road TV show. It's a Golden Road TV show.
There's a lot of examples of resilience. A good example would be if you think about the indigenous people that live in our country today, or anywhere in the world really. That these are cultures that oftentimes have suffered really catastrophic events, mass die-offs from disease or warfare or subjugation from other cultures, and they're still here, and their cultures are still intact, right? They still have a lineage that they've passed down for thousands of years. That's a really good definition of resilience, what a resilient community is. And we want to build more resilience so that we can not only survive and sustain, but we can thrive and regenerate. We can make the place that we're in better than it was before we were here. So for myself, I'm a civil engineer, and I mostly work with infrastructure. When we hear about resilience in my field of work, it almost always has to do with infrastructure, almost always. And because that's what I do. That infrastructure can be hard infrastructure or it can be soft infrastructure. You know, if you're worried that there's going to be a flood, you could build a flood wall. But you could also develop the floodplain so that you lessen these impacts of flooding. One really interesting thing that I've been learning about and been encouraged of is that a lot of the engineering fields that I work in are more and more understanding the importance of this soft infrastructure, like watersheds, that to develop the watershed is really important for maintaining our clean water, or for managing the trees properly, right? It's a really important for if a fire comes through, and there's a lot of links between these things. So that could also have a lot to do with economic development and culture. Resource management is not quite the same as what I do, but it's another piece of resiliency that's really incredibly important. The way that we manage our resources for the community that we live in, it really can make the community and much stronger. So, and it's not just resource management, it's not just infrastructure. There's so many things that contribute to the community that make our community stronger. And that could be economic development, it can be arts and culture, it could be independent media, and community involvement is a big piece. And so that's why we've invited these people here today to speak, because these are people who in their communities are doing things to make their community more resilient. The projects and the efforts that they contribute to are building a stronger community. So we want to highlight that, make those connections stronger between people so they can share resources. And so that when we see that we know there are real solutions in the community, let's back that. You know, in a world like today where, you know, with the social media that we have, which, you know, provides a lot of benefits, it also has highlighted a lot of divisions. And I think that when we talk about what can we do together to make the community together better, and we say, oh, look, there's something that's working, that's something we can all get behind. If we see there's a real success and we agree this is working and this is a solution and it's doing a lot of good, that's something that brings a community together because we can all agree on something. And I think that's one of the key reasons why we're doing this. So I want to remind everyone that we're building an asset directory. So if you want to contribute your name to that, we want to have a listing of the people who are doing this work so that if we need to make connections or find collaborations, we can use that directory for that. So let me introduce the first guest that I have here today. I think it's worth mentioning that we're here at the headwaters of the Sacramento River. And this, I think this is a very resilient place. It's a protected place with public access where people can come and enjoy the beautiful landscape and see this is where your water comes from. And it's important to have places like this. So let me...
And welcome to the Mount Shasta City Park. Thank you for the opportunity to kind of give you an update of what our Recreation Park District do. I had the pleasure of being the administrator for the Recreation District in South County, Mount Shasta, Weed, and Dunsmuir. It's my 43rd year. I've been very thankful to have this opportunity to provide services for our various communities. So I'll talk about Mount Shasta. We're out here, this used to be a Chico Day School back in the 20s. And it progressed to be a National Guard Armory, and then got to be the city park. And in 2006, the Recreation Park District Board was deeded the park from the city to be a district facility. So currently the district has two major parks. This 19-acre city park, which includes the headwater of the Sacramento River. This is our passive park. We have a 36-acre park on the northern part of town, on the west part of town by the high school, which is 36 acres. That is our active park. We have picnic facilities, athletic fields, skate parks, and we have built in the year 1999, the outdoor ice skating rink. This is the largest and the only hockey regulation rink north of Sacramento. And I just left there this afternoon. We opened up our season yesterday, so we're looking to have a 14-week season. Skate park is a very popular facility there also. So our Shasta East Park facility has grown over the years to be one of the popular facilities for us to offer all kinds of recreational opportunities. The Rec District also manages the sports fields in the city. We lease the assistant field from the elementary school district for athletic sports, the Mount Shasta Youth Sports Park, as well as the Shasta East Park. We also have agreement with the high school. We manage their baseball park to provide baseball programs for the high school as well as the various age groups here in Siskiyou County. The Recreation Park District is pretty active in our community. As mentioned earlier, we provide a senior nutrition program. We provide meals for seniors in South County, Mount Shasta, Weed, and Dunsmuir. We've been a service provider since 1986, and we're proud of that. We have developed a good program for seniors, homebound people that cannot come here to lunch. We have homebound services which have drivers that transport in all 3 cities, or 4 cities, as well as people come to lunch here. We have very special events. We partner with the service clubs in Mount Shasta, work closely with the Chamber, the Rotary Club, the Elks. We have a couple of fundraisers. The Mount Shasta Rotary are hosted here. Blackberry Festival on Labor Day weekend. We have a bike race. It's called the Siskiyou Craig Century, which is in June. It's probably going to be later on this year. And then we work with the Elks. They have their Easter egg hunt, which is here during Easter weekend. So again, we're really active in providing opportunities for various age groups. And so that's pretty much in Mount Shasta. Our staff is very committed to providing all kinds of programs as well as services. My district in Dunsmuir is our smallest district. The highlight there is that they have a botanical gardens group, a very designed botanical gardens. We work closely with the community down there with the garden programs. We have the county's largest outdoor swimming pool in Dunsmuir, and we just redone the Dunsmuir Community Center for various receptions, special events, birthday parties, nonprofit sponsored events. And also we manage the Dunsmuir Ballpark, which is, I don't know if you know about sports, but that's the home of Babe Ruth, where he played in 1926. He came through Dunsmuir and played down there in the Dunsmuir Ballpark. My district in Weed has been very active in the community. We have 4 outdoor parks. We have an outdoor pool. We manage all kinds of programs and facilities for the various communities. In 2014, we lost our community center due to the Bowles fire, and we're thankful that we are starting to rebuild. We started the rebuilding process this past June, and we're hoping to have it completed by this July of 2018. And that's going to have a therapeutic pool, a large community room, office space, program space, commercial kitchen, for us to expand our services in weed to provide many opportunities for our residents and the many visitors to our district. So as you can see, we are very active in our communities, various communities. I stay connected as much as I can to be involved with the promotion and to provide opportunities for all our residents in our communities. So again, thank you for coming to Mount Shasta. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to working with a lot of you in the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank all y'all for coming out and coming up and visit us here in Mount Shasta. It's, the job that I serve here in the community is I'm the executive director of the Mount Shasta Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also run the Mount Shasta Visitors Bureau in town here, which is a center that was housed here in the middle of town with both my office and the Visitors Bureau there, which we employ 3 part-time employees there that service the community by greeting tourists that come to the area. And you know, I'll just talk about tourism for a little bit. Mount Shasta, we're in here in the far northern California, and all the years prior, we were basically a lumber timber driven industry here in Northern California. And over the years, that industry is pretty much drying up after the spotted owl and all the good stuff there. And we have a lot of timberland that's still managed as timberland. So when it comes to economic development, we have to look outside the box. And, you know, tourism is a big thing for us here in the Mount Shasta region. We'd like to position ourselves a little different than the Tahoe region here. You know, pretty much it's you can spend a weekend here in Mount Shasta and get the outdoor activities you're looking for with lakes, streams, waterfalls, hiking, climbing, mountain rock climbing, whatever you desire, bike riding for not nearly the money you spend if you go to Tahoe. So that's we're showing the option to Tahoe is here in the far north California, which is Mount Shasta. And we have a new program going on now you'll be seeing in the near future called Discover Siskiyou. It's a marketing program developed by the hotelers here in Siskiyou County that are going to be investing $500,000 a year into tourism and marketing the beauty we have here in the far northern California. So that's an interesting time for us to see how that takes us up. I do know for a fact in the last 3 years, tourism levels have been up in the Mount Shasta region, which is a good thing. Prior to being with the Chamber of Commerce, I was the marketing director for the Mount Shasta Ski Park for many years before that. So I could see how the snow flew in the winter is pretty much how our tourism flows also here in the Mount Shasta area. Summertime, we have a great destination area in the summer, and we always have here in Mount Shasta. We've all enjoyed it, culminating with our 4th of July run walk that we have every year annually, which is a huge boon to our economy. We have approximately 300 members of the Chamber of Commerce at Mount Shasta. Out of those 300 members, quite a few of those are from out of our area, being South County, a lot of McLeod folks, businesses in Dunsmuir. I feel we represent the whole South County with our centrally located offices and the visitor center being right there. I also serve on the board of directors here in Siskiyou County of the Shasta Cascade Wonderland Association, which is based out of the Redding area, which covers 5 Northern California counties, which is devoted to tourism. I also serve on the board of the other Welcome Center at the border, which is the C2C Joint Powers Authority here in Siskiyou County, which is the other Welcome Center on the Klamath River as you come in from Oregon. So I cover both ends of the area when it comes to tourism, both areas. We just did a recent workshop with JEDI here in town, and also the EDD department for the Northern California region. And we found out that our number one source of growth for business here in our area is tourism. And we have to look at that. When there's more tourism, there's more restaurants, there's more shops, and then everybody can survive. We just have to find a way to keep the tourism going all year round and eliminate the shoulder seasons. But we got a strong Chamber of Commerce. We've got a great group of businesses in it. We have more new businesses opening downtown. We have a new AT&T store opening downtown, so that's going to be nice for us. We don't have to travel to Redding or to Medford to get our services. And we do quite well. We've got our events are strong here in the area. Like I said, the 4th of July event. We also do a spring golf tournament for the Chamber of Commerce. And right now, this is coming up next weekend. We're having our annual Winter Magic, and we're having our Holiday Light Parade. It's going to be our first annual this year. It's something new for us. And as of yesterday, when I was in the office, we had already hit my goal for the floats for the parade. So I'm pretty excited about that. And there are more and more signing up this week. So if you're not busy the day after Thanksgiving, come on out to downtown Mount Shasta. We got a great little festival with our annual tree lighting also that takes place at 6 p.m. So Mount Shasta is a great place to be. If you're watching this in Nevada County, I spent many years there myself in the Auburn, Grass Valley area, Nevada City area. And when I left there, this is where I came. So from one beautiful area to another. But thank you for the time tonight. Any questions on the Chamber of Commerce, feel free to look us up at visitmountshasta.com. Very active tourism website we have here to tell you all things good in Mount Shasta, or you can visit us at the MountShastaChamber.com also for more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Michael, for putting this together and having me here to represent the our group, which is McLeod Partners and McLeod Millworks. Welcome to McLeod. In July 1st of 2014, we purchased the mill from Nestle's, the former McLeod Mill site. The mill, I always tell people, there's nothing between the mountain and the mill, and it's just an incredible opportunity that we have to redevelop this property. Next. The McLeod Mill started in the 1880s, and it is an incredible piece of property, and it was the largest cedar mill in California. At one point, they were producing 1 million board feet of lumber a day, and it's an amazing property. That's back when logging was big. It was a company town. If you worked in the mill, you were allowed to live in the town. You shopped at the company store, you ate at the company restaurants. You went to the 28,000 square foot hospital to have all your, from cradle to grave, they took care of you. Once you were out of work at the mill, you had to move from the property, and in 2 weeks you had to leave town. The mill at one point employed 1,500 men. This was a big mill. Thanks. It's a big mill and a big dirty site. It's the largest heavy industrial zone site from San Francisco to the Oregon border. It's 278 acres. It's all zoned heavy industrial. It had 7 processing mills on the site. This is a 14-acre log pond that they fill 24/7 with a valve that could dump 1 million gallons an hour into that pond. This is a big mill. That's a big pond. They have a lot of water rights. Why Nestle's was there. Again, another big dirty picture. People forget how dirty lumber processing was. This smokestack here burned all the wood waste and heated all the buildings in town from the mill. They also heated all the sidewalks and melted all the snow off the sidewalks. It was pretty industrious. Thanks. Then the mill closes. So between logging issues, environmental regulations, it was decided, it went through a couple ownerships, they tried to save it, and then it closes. So what we purchased in July 1st of 2014, thanks, Jim, next slide, was a big old industrial site that had been abandoned for a decade and a half. There wasn't an intact window, there wasn't a volt of electricity, there wasn't an ounce of water on the site, and it had heavily overgrown. Thanks, Jim. But we bought a city. We bought 400,000 square feet of buildings, 278 acres, all overgrown, all in disrepair, and we decided to take this process on. So we started working on the buildings. This is the old fuel building, which is a cement bunker. We just shot a movie, an apocalyptic film in there, which turned out great. This is the largest wood building in California. It's 106,000 square feet. It's 970 feet long. We have it all powered now with LED lighting, state-of-the-art cameras, and there's 240 vehicles in storage there right now. We started with the mission statement of being environmentally responsible, good stewards of the land, and to bring companies and the jobs they provide to town. So that's what we started with. This is our first day on the site. We plunked a sign, put my cell phone number. That's the front gate, the mountains in the background, and the crane shed is right there. That's my partner, Dave. It was the two of us that decided to take this property on. That's not Photoshopped. This is a spectacular photo that I just took with my camera one of the first days, and it showed the brilliance of the property and the spectacularness of Mount Shasta, and that was our inspiration. That became our driving point to go forward with the property. Now, this is the journey of any great idea. You end up with, wow, this is a terrific idea, and then you fall into the pits of what have we done? And we did. It's 278 acres of just complete blight and neglect. And I feel like we're on the way out. It wasn't until January 1st of this year we had our first tenants. Now I've got 8 working tenants on the site. We have 20 employees, and we're keeping to our word of hiring locals and starting good businesses there. This is one of our cleanup efforts. Nestle's blew up all 7 mills on the property, so the town could never think they could put a mill in there. I wasn't involved in the fight, pro or con Nestle's. I just tell people I'm post Nestle's. We took over after they left. We bought them out. Now we clean the property up, but they left piles of debris like this. Massive cleanup effort. This is the first time we put water on the property. There was no water on the property for the previous 15 years. Nestle's didn't, they welded all the valves on the hydrant shut, so you couldn't put a fire out there if you did have a fire. So by reinstituting the water, we also get big elements there. This is a good picture. We get about 10 feet, 20 feet of snow there, depending on the year, and it's a lot to deal with. And that's also a big element of how quickly we can move forward. We basically have an 8-month building season and a 4-month snow season. This again is one of our cleanup efforts. We've cleared 65 acres of Scotch broom. We've created defensible fire space on the property. And all these buildings now have power. All these buildings are now habitable. We've got 8 working bathrooms on the site from 0. And then we've put power to about 140,000 square feet. Next slide, Jim, thanks. Being it's such a big property and big buildings, this building is 85 feet tall. Everything is enormous. Our electrical runs are half a mile, quarter of a mile. And it's a lot, and we had to redo everything because in its time of abandonment, the guys who like to do that kind of thing came and stole all the copper, took all the wiring out of the place, broke every window, broke every light bulb, and so we started from scratch. This was the first day we turned power on in the site. That's me in the background. And again, those are all LED lights, which Pacific Power has. That's part of the resilience, part of the sustainability, sticking to our mission of hiring locals and doing things right and being a good steward of the land. We've replaced about 12, 14 acres of roof. I mean, we could replace roofs forever. These also are, you're trying to do things in sustainable ways, reusing. We have a big boneyard. We reuse materials. We're reprocessing. Our attitude is to stick with our core principles, which is to be responsible stewards of the land and be conscious about how our carbon footprint. Again, one of our spaces, I have a gaming manufacturer who goes in this space, hiring locals. I have a prefab Quonset hut builder, Q Cabin, from Vern Sneed from Mount Shasta. He's a general contractor, and he built 5 homes out of that space this year. And this was another one of my tenants shipping a project that he built. We had 1,100 people on the site for the eclipse, which was just tremendous. And the Wintune chief blessed the site and ran a 90-minute meditation during the eclipse event. And it was just a spectacular event, and we intend on doing more. Again, we're taking care of the locals. This is one of my local tenants. She's got a fix-it shop, and she buys things, repairs them, and sells them on a garage sale type of thing. And she's making a go of it, and it's great to be able to provide her space, and she's thrilled to be out there. This was an impromptu event where we had 1,000 people show up for a party, probably the best party, don't you agree, Jim, that had been in McLeod forever. We had 6 bands, 1,000 people. At one point, we had 250 people out there line dancing, 249 who could, and then myself. And it was so much fun. I couldn't believe how great the sound was in that building. Turns out you have to seismically retrofit that building to do this on a legal basis, but we will do more events like this. It was a very impromptu event because it started pouring that morning, and this was an event that was supposed to go on outside on the town square, and we got a 9 o'clock phone call for an event that started at 10 o'clock, and it came off like clockwork. It was really fun. This is another, I have a Forever Green Christmas Tree Company. It's another one of my great tenants, and it's a tremendous success story. Again, we're an incubator to help people get along, and we gave him some land to start with, and now he's up to 4,500 trees, living trees that are grown in pots, and people foster these trees. They go back and forth to people's homes in the Bay Area and then come back up after New Year's, and they spend the year on the site. Then we have 2 weekends a year where these are customers from Google, Netflix, Yahoo, who come up and camp on the site to visit their Christmas tree, and he does events. They go out to the falls, they have music on the site, but it's become very successful. We will have a camp out for 500 Google employees on the site this summer. We have glamping cabins. These are glamour tent cabins that we have. We're filling a 4-acre lake on the site right now to stock with trout, and these will be on the shoreline. We're going to have a big beach, which will go along with all our events and some of our other activities on site. This is a layout of the site. Again, we started with this big industrial site, and then we decided okay, we're going to cordon this off and how we're going to lay this property out. So we have an industrial area where we have light manufacturing and local citizens who have businesses there. And then we have this view corridor. That view of the mountain will always remain open. That should never be built. And so we're building a 10 to 12 acre concert site. We have a parking and camping area. We have parking for 5,000 cars. And then we're going to have heavier manufacturing over on this side. I just had a tenant take this building, and we're just moving forward with development. And again, we started with a property that had been abandoned for 15 years, had no water, no power, and we now have 8 businesses out there and lots of activity going on. It was pretty busy out there today. We provide, one of the other things we provide in town, we do free firewood for all the seniors in the community. We did a couple of timber harvests, which provided us with about 500-600 cords of wood. And so we split and dried, and we provide free firewood to all the seniors in town. And I think we're on to the last slide. This is a nice, I have wonderful people who are helping me lay these buildings out, do 3D models of it. We're able to do real-time photos of how the property works and how your business will fit in that space. And this is my last slide, and that's, oh, there's another. So it's pretty spectacular. When you come to this property and Mount Shasta's in the background, there's no prettier view of Mount Shasta than from this site. That's what you get every day. I never get tired of it. I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity. My earlier slide said McLeod Millworks and McLeod Partners. My ownership group is McLeod Partners. The property's called McLeod Millworks. We have McLeodPartners.com, which explains the ownership group and how we work in our mission statement. And McLeod Millworks is actually my links to all my tenants on site and the businesses that are coming. We will have a brewery. We will have other things going on, and it's just exciting to move forward in this county. I love this place, and we didn't buy it for anything other than wanting to do good by this community. And Nestle had long ago stopped taking care of the property. They needed to go away. Thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce. That was excellent. That's that's a really exciting project that you mentioned to us, and I want to thank you for what you did. That really brings to mind one of the things I mentioned before, which is we're not really looking just to be sustainable in our communities. We want to be regenerative, and we want to, take places that maybe have suffered and build them up into places that are actually growing and thriving. And you touch on the activities on your project are touching on so many different aspects of life in the community. And it seems kind of broad when you talk about this all as the same thing, because it's arts and culture and economics and media, But really, a lot of these things are connected, just the way that the timber harvest is connected with the resource management of the land, which is connected with all of these different things, the economic resources of the community, small businesses. So I won't go on, but I just wanted to thank you for that, Governor.
Thank you for that introduction. And I think what I'm going to talk about here is with resilience and restoration, not so much on the economic side, but I'm involved in the environmental side, or the natural history, or the ecosystem. I'll tell you a little bit about maybe the type of work I do, and maybe types of research or restoration projects that there are going on around here. And Michael asked me to talk about some of the water issues that I've been involved in too, and I can maybe run over some of those. And I guess I should say that I didn't have to live here, and I chose to move here. I got my degree and my work in research area. I'm a research ecologist, and I started doing research in universities, doing basic science, and that was interesting. I enjoyed it all, but I thought there could be more, and I was interested in maybe bridging what science can offer towards real resource management problems. And I became, I guess, what you'd call a consultant. I call myself a consulting ecologist. And I was in Corvallis, Oregon. I was doing research projects up there, and there's a lot of forestry and stream type projects. I decided I would try to do some consulting, break away from the research field. I became like a research refugee, and I decided to go into the consulting field. And a lot of people ask me, why are you doing that? It was a big move, but I decided that I would rather bridge science towards real problems and have people that were really interested in solving problems talk to me instead of just doing research that you put in the library and books. And from there, we moved then to Mount Shasta here, just as a discretionary move, because once I started my business, getting a few projects here and there, we found that I could do it from home, and I could live wherever we wanted to. And we started looking from Corvallis, where would we want to live? And my wife was from California. We wanted to move a little closer to California. And as long as I could still do work in Oregon, we thought, well, Mount Shasta seemed like the good place to move. And it was a risky move because there's not a lot of research type projects going on here, but I'm really glad I did it. It turns out with the rise of the internet and networking, you can pretty much work in a lot of different areas and live where you want, and that's what I do. So I raised my family here. My kids have grown up and gone on to other things, and I'm still living here now. And I'm going to talk about the types of projects I've worked on here, and it's been largely in the area. I'm not so much of an environmental consultant. When you talk about those people, they're usually, I would say, working more in permitting, compliance, and when people want to build a project, how do you follow the laws? And I've been involved in that a little bit, but I'd like to think of the work I do as more of using science to manage nature. And projects I've worked on, let's see, I think there's about 4 or 5 different projects that I've worked on. One is with the Trinity River Restoration Program. The Trinity River is a river just west of here. Many of you probably know it. And they built a dam there, and the salmon started declining with the building of the dam, and eventually they came around and said, listen, we need to restore this river somehow. And there's a big program now, a federal program that is funded at the level of about $15 million a year to restore the Trinity River and try to get the fisheries back to pre-dam levels. And I'm involved with that in a small way, I would say. I help out with meetings they have, and they have to make decisions on that. So the Trinity River is a big program that's going on here now. It's a really lovely river too. I'd say it's still functioning very well, but it has a huge restoration program going on, and probably one of the biggest in the nation, I would say, for river restoration. You'll see big construction sites going on in there, and those are being set up to actually build the river back the way it should be. So Trinity River is one of them. Another one I've worked on here in Mount Shasta is the Shasta River. I've worked with the Shasta RCD, Resource Conservation District. It's kind of a semi-autonomous organization that gets money to do restoration. And they work a lot with the ranching community. So it's a pretty interesting group. I don't know how I should say this. The ranching community is, they're focused on their product. It's an industry, and of course, like most industries, there can be environmental consequences from that. The big one is irrigation. They irrigate water, and yet the Shasta River flows off the slopes of Mount Shasta, comes from spring-fed systems, and it's one of the most amazing rivers, being really pure water, having anadromous fisheries come up from the Pacific Ocean, coho, Chinook, steelhead come into there. And yet, as California is really good at developing their resources, it's been a real resource development history, starting with the gold rush that brought people here to California. And a lot of those people saw, well, the resources here, we could use these rivers to create a nice agricultural business. They need that water to irrigate the land because we live in a Mediterranean climate here, which is very dry in the summer. They need the water to grow things in the summer, so they take the water out of the river. And there's consequences for the anadromous fisheries. So the Resource Conservation District gets money from the state of California, and they try to work with the ranchers to improve the fishery conditions and work with them on irrigation projects, and it's a pretty interesting group. And I've worked with them on a number of projects, and one we worked on was they instituted riparian fencing because they want to graze their cattle there and they get into the river, so they started putting fences there, and we looked at the consequences of the riparian fencing and how well it's working in a restoration format. Let's see, other programs we worked in. I work on another type of project. In fact, I hire a lot of young guys here in Mount Shasta have worked with me on this, and I'm seeing there's a lot of interest. Young people are looking for opportunities to do work that's in a restoration format. And a big project we do every spring, we work with Weyerhaeuser Corporation back in Oregon. It's a job I had started when we lived in Corvallis. We look at fish distributions on lands owned by Weyerhaeuser. Before they do a clear cut in Oregon or a harvest, they need to know whether or not there's fish in their streams. And if there's fish, they have to do a bigger buffer, they call that, or a stream protection along the stream. If there's no fish, they're allowed to have less protections for the stream. So they hire us to go out there with these backpack electroshockers. We walk around in the forest on their lands, and we shock the streams, and we produce a survey of the streams on their lands. And it's a lot of fun for young guys, get to climb around in the forest, see a lot of landscape, and plus they get to shock fish in the streams and net them and handle fish, so that's a lot of fun too. And I've hired a lot of young guys here from Mount Shasta. They've shown interest in that. So we're always looking for new workers, and then we're going to be doing it again this spring, and anyone's interested, and they can contact me through Ecosystems Northwest. We're on the web. Let's see, other projects I've worked on restoration-wise. Another project that's not so stream-related, it's my favorite project. It's maybe the last one I'll talk about. And my training is not so much as a fisheries person, although there's been a lot of work in there because anadromous fisheries are so important here in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. I've got work in that area, and I became a de facto fisheries biologist. But my original training is in watershed function, forest watershed function, and specifically carbon cycling. How forests absorb and release carbon is what I looked at, because I was real interested in this process of CO2 increases and global warming back in graduate school. And I thought, well, if I could actually consult in that and not just do research. I like to have consulting because my dad was owned his own business himself, and he seemed to have a pretty good life. And I thought, well, if I can be a scientist and own my own business, the consultant was the way to go. And I thought, well, carbon cycling, this is certain to be a problem, and this is back in the 80s when I was studying it, that I'll get into that, and I'll have work all over the place in this. And it turned out, though, I had no idea about the politics. The U.S. wouldn't sign the Kyoto Protocol, so we never really got on the ball on carbon cycling or processing carbon. How do you manage the landscape for carbon? But however, now, as you know, California has made that decision to become work on their carbon footprints and have a cap and trade program. So there's 2 projects I'm working on now that just got going in forests and carbon cycling. And what I'm doing is, how do forests absorb carbon? How good of a sink? And can we do things in the forest that might enhance that sink, that they could be a larger storage of carbon and hopefully reduce mitigate the impacts we're seeing with global warming and CO2 increases in the atmosphere. One project is up in the Chester area with the Forest Service. We're looking at a series of forests, and we're describing how carbon cycles through the soil. It's not really well studied. A lot of people know about how carbon is fixed in forests, but it turns out soils are a much larger store of carbon than the forest. They're up to 3 times more carbon is stored in the soil than in the forest. We don't really understand them very well. So we have a project where we're trying to look at, as they're going to institute some forestry practices there, how might that affect the cycling of carbon through the soils. And one last project I'm working on, not so much, well, I guess it would be called Restoration 2, just a brand new one that's just getting started with the California Cap and Trade, where California caps the CO2 that can be emitted by industries, and that means you can only emit so much CO2, and if they can't meet their cap, they're allowed to purchase a little bit of an offset from forests. And the offsets from forests, people who own the forest are able to say, well, I'm going to manage my forest in a way that absorbs a little more carbon, and I can sell those credits to these people who need these caps. That's called cap and trade. However, in order to sell the credits in the forest, they have to prove that they're really doing something different and unique above business as usual to absorb that carbon, and that's where I kind of come in. There's businesses now where we're getting some work where they're selling they're putting their carbon credits on a market so the emitters can purchase it, and it has to be verified. So now we're going around to different forests who are asking to have their credits be verified. So we go out to the forest. We're kind of like tax auditors almost. We go to the forest and we are going to verify indeed that they're doing something right in their operation, that they are fixing more carbon there. And so that's a new industry that's coming along now, and we're getting work in that too. So that's the last type of restoration type work. So it's both been in water related. Now it's starting to transition more to carbon type programs. So again, I'll just wrap my comments up that I'm a scientist that turned into operating a consulting business. I was able to move to Mount Shasta and live a wonderful life here in a wonderful area, and it's worked out really well for me. And I think other people, there's a lot of young people now are asking themselves, well, what do I want to do with my career? I think there is a growing career in the restoration field, and in areas like streams, as is a mature field, and the carbon field is a growing field now. And there's other things you can do too. And I'd like to say that I like the comments about how tourism is really important here in Mount Shasta. I can see that the product Mount Shasta will really produce is a tourism resource, that people want to come here and see a natural environment and play in it and interact with it. And I think restoration is really important in that we maintain this type of pristine, or this thing that everyone thinks they like when they see nature, and they love it here. And so restoration fields should be growing, and I hope that our society continues to support it. And California is pretty progressive in that they do it, but who knows, with there's always this give and take or push and pull that industry needs to make money, and sometimes they don't really. Well, I have to be careful how I say it, but I think you know what I'm saying, that industry is usually profit motivated, and restoration or preservation of the environment usually is secondary on their agenda. Some industries are better than others, but I think if the citizens demand it, industries will follow it, because usually they're producing a product that the citizens purchase. So the citizens have a lot of a sway on that, and I'm seeing that California is very progressive in that. And I like what I see in California. So, and I like what I see in Mount Shasta. So thank you.
We never know what to expect when people come to a live broadcast of the show. Some want to come for the performances, some want to come for the potluck and the food, some want to come for the education, some want to come to do networking, and others come who want to present music, their voice to the community. So we've created this show really as a forum that every week we're out in the communities, not only doing live broadcasts, but really doing focuses on individuals and organizations that are contributing to the quality of life here. Again, from Sacramento all the way up to the state line of Oregon, and from Truckee, Tahoe, all the way to Sacramento. My personal area of expertise and interest, I've worked for several universities, starting with the five colleges in Amherst, Massachusetts, and Northampton, where I worked for Smith, Mount Holyoke, Hampshire College, Amherst College, and UMass, where I worked for the Theater Arts Department. So since I've been in California, I work for the University of California, Santa Cruz, from their Theater Arts Department. But I moved to Nevada County about 7 years ago, because the trend is that arts and culture, mostly in our society, are seen as well, something that's on the side. It's an accessory to lifestyle and quality of life. So a lot of the resources and funding for the arts dwindled while biotech was going through the roof. So I could see the trend, and I really wanted to find an innovative way where I could do what I love to do, but also serve the community and not just my own self-interest of doing arts and productions. And I have produced some fairly sizable events. So again, not to toot my own horn, but just to say that I've really gone from this global perspective to really bringing it to my own backyard and to the region that I live in. And one of the ways I can do that is by showcasing some of the people that you've seen here today. Although we have this theme of sustainability, resilience, and economic development, arts and culture, but over the last 14 months covering 180 individuals and organizations. So a little bit later, when we have our potluck, we're gonna get our blood sugar going, and we're gonna do a little bit of a team building exercise through community drumming. This is something I've done internationally. I work in a lot of schools, because in this day and age, so many kids, they call it Generation Glow, are looking at their phones, that they're not making that face-to-face eye contact. They're alienated. They feel trapped in some alienation and solitude, because even though the technology is a benefit and we're using it today, it's also a way that keeps people, and even on the level of the brain, from having that human enriching experience. So what I do is I come into classrooms. I've worked with everything from senior centers and universities to preschools. I work with a lot of downtown business associations where I come in with the drums, and we get people doing nonverbal communication, leadership development, creative self-expression, and self-esteem development through a very ancient discipline called drumming. So that's what I do when I'm not here working on the show. There's a lot more I'd like to say, but I want to just use that as a way to parlay an introduction for the next person. One of my very good friends, Steve Goldsmith, who does multimedia. He's been doing multimedia work for a long time. He's worked with a lot of musicians and groups in a lot of different venues. Recently, I collaborated with him and his daughter, Michelle Goldsmith, who recently, I believe over the last year and a half, has taken over what was, at one point, a very legendary venue for productions and recording. A lot of artists did recording there, groups like Tom Petty, Tool, legendary producer, whose name I can't recall, but I'm gonna let her talk about that. But nonetheless, she's moved into the area and opened a venue at the Palace Theater in Weed, where she's very committed to giving the community another opportunity to present on stage. A few months ago, I brought my group up, the World Beatniks. We're a world music group with a message. We talk about, many cultures, but regardless of politics or religious beliefs, age or gender, that the arts are a way that we can all get together and enjoy that human experience without having to let all the things that divide us get in the way. So we went and we did a performance there with the World Beatniks. And I have to say, it's a great establishment. I know she's building. She's also trying to provide conscious and healthy food. But I'll let her talk about what she's doing. But I just wanted to get up here to share a little bit more of my vision about what we're doing with the show, how we're giving people features. I come out every week, 3-4 days a week. I'm shooting educational pieces. I'm going to events. We work with lots of venues and organizations. We're actually building an upcoming event calendar so people who are a little bit more with their finger on the pulse of independent media and want to know what's happening can find out what's happening and can help to support the organizations and the people that really are community minded. So on that, I would have got a nice round of applause, and I'd like to welcome someone who's been really working very hard, and I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for her, from the Weed Palace Theater, Michelle Goldsmith.
Good afternoon. Michelle Goldsmith, as Michael here introduced, the director and producer at the Weed Palace Theater. Beautiful legend in the community of Weed, historical landmark in the heart of Weed on Main Street that we've been restoring into a live concert venue now for almost 2 years. We've been open again to the community and restoring the structure into the glorious establishment that it has a very rich history of being. So I'm very honored to be carrying forward the legacy of Sylvia Massey, who is the renowned recording artist that has brought many, many talented musicians to the area and put her work and life force into building a beautiful business in the historic Weed Palace Theater that I am now carrying forward and bringing into a community-oriented endeavor around arts, culture, music, entertainment, and so forth. And so, you know, we are continuing to grow with our up and coming events. Our next event will be December 1st, a group called Terrapin Flyer. They are out of upstate New York. So we have a good bit of interest from groups that are able to make the stop off, since our location is right off of the interstate of I-5, and get to experience this beautiful community with the majestic Mount Shasta located right above the theater as well, just directly in line, helping to really enhance the energies that we're all working on with building and growing community here. So I am very thankful for the time today to get to speak on a public template and bring more familiarity and reach out to our community as far as what we're doing here. So again, the Weed Palace Theater on Main Street. We are on Facebook, where you can see our up and coming events. We also have an Eventbrite link and have a nice schedule of very talented musicians coming up, and look forward to be able to deliver more of an outlet and help to grow community foundation here in Siskiyou County and beyond. So thank you again.
Arts and culture are really critical to what we're talking about here, because really the way that ideas and behaviors are formed is through who we believe we are. And that's reflected in the songs we sing, and the games we play, and the sports we play. The things we spend our time doing and believing ourselves to be, that's really what forms the ideas about how you're going to run a business, how you're going to manage your life and the landscape and your community. So it's very important, and it brings people together, brings in economic prosperity, and it gives people a voice. And so that leads me to the next guest here, who has been a publisher for Lotus Guide magazine, Rahasian Poe. And independent media is so critical to be able to hear different voices that aren't just brought down from outside, you know, voices from within the community about different ways of thinking about things. So
I'm Rahasia Poe. You can hashtag Rahasia Uncensored and pull up a lot of what I do. My wife and I, we do the Lotus Guide magazine. I have a radio show called Spiritual Activist on BBS Radio. And I like to reach out and find some of the underlying reasons that why are we so separated? And when you get to the point of being resilient, why aren't we resilient? And I think it's because so many of us feel separated as individuals and we don't see the unity at a deeper level. A while back, I wrote a book called To Believe or Not to Believe, and the subtitle was The Social and Neurological Consequences of Belief Systems. While I was writing that book, I was privy to really research religion and politics and basically our world history. And I noticed that on the surface level, yeah, we seem so different and isolated. But I noticed with religions in particularly, if you go back in time and see where those writings originally came from, they start going into more of a unified field. And if you go down even deeper, it gets into another realm, which science is now catching up to. And this brings me to the topic that I'd like to talk about. And it has to do with something that scientists have been looking at. And if you ask most scientists, come up with an explanation right now, what's your best guess is our reality? Well, the popular consensus is our reality is a holographic reality. In other words, a simulation. Now, whether the person doing the projecting is a god or the matrix designer or the great spirit, you could call it a lot of things, but it seems like there is a process going on that is really, really similar to a holographic projection. And one of the things that brings this up and makes it really clear is, first of all, if we were in a matrix, if we're living in a holographic projection, how would we know that? Every single thing that we would use to gauge that and to try to research it is also from the hologram, the simulation. And it is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. It's an illusion. So everything that we would try to gauge it with would also be part of the illusion. So of course it's going to look real. If we're having a dream, in the dream, if we start looking at the dream from the dream state, it looks totally real. So how would we tell if we're actually in a simulation? One of the ways is to see if there's anything underneath the fabric of space that science could tell us. And lo and behold, there is. If you look at the absolute bottom, the atomic and subatomic structure of life, Professor James Gates found an interesting thing, because if you look at the process of what happens on a subatomic level, you can get that process and turn it into an equation. And the equation is very, very long, but I won't even say the whole thing, but the equation is a error-correcting block code. Now, the error-correcting block code is how nature keeps itself intact, from the seed to the whole process. There is an equation that explains that, and it's a very, very definite equation. So one of the people on his staff said, hey, that equation looks a little familiar. And lo and behold, that equation is the same exact equation that we use on the internet when we send an email. That equation grabs all of our data, all of our information, holds it intact, and puts it through because we're going through satellites and fiber optics and wires. If this equation didn't work right, we wouldn't get the same data at the receiving end as we do at the transmitting end. Now, why would we come up with the same exact equation that life uses if there isn't a similarity of the same process. This is leading everybody to believe that this is a simulation. And if I had time, I could go into it. There's probably 10 different things that really show us clearly that we're living in a holographic universe. Now, why is this important? Because in a hologram comes from one image. And as that image goes out, you can take any part of that image and create the whole. Well, we do the same thing. We are a direct reflection of the universe in the same way that every DNA in our system could build another me, another you. It is the same holographic process. And this becomes important because if we can recognize this, this undercuts all of the feelings of individuality and separation that we feel in the world. We are part of one unified field. Religions call it God. Everything has a name for it, but it is a unified field of consciousness. And if we can understand this on a nuts and bolts level, where we can actually see an equation, it will help us understand and go deeper into the aspect of why we feel so separate. Why do we feel like all of you sitting out here? It is really, really an illusion that we are separate. We are part of one thing, one being, one consciousness, one energy. That becomes really important to recognize, because if that's true, we are part of one data stream of information, and that data stream goes both ways. So if I'm doing my, whatever it is, prayers or meditation to get in touch with that deeper aspect of myself and really doing the inner work, I'm connecting with that data stream. At that point, my thoughts become very, very important, because in a holographic projection, if you take one part of the hologram, pull it out, it'll reproduce the whole hologram. But if you change that one little aspect, it will change all of the other aspects of that hologram and bleed back up into the main holographic projection. This is why and how we can change this world, by doing the work on ourselves and being conscientious, doing the inner work and the outer work. Events like this are really important. You know, this gentleman here is taking a piece of land and bringing it back. Other people are looking out for us with the forest and our environment and our water and everything, and we're all doing everything that we can possibly do. And it's really important to see how this process can really wake us all up to our inner divinity, however you want to put it. And it has nothing to do with religion as we see it in the everyday world. It's become so conflictive out there. Most of the wars are religious holy wars. Politics does nothing but divide us. We need a new way to think about life. We need a new way to see ourselves, our place in this world, and in reality itself. And I think if we can do that, we'll have a really good shot at saving ourselves. Because right now, we cannot continue to do the game the way we've been doing it. If we continue down this road, we're done for. Okay? It's not going to work. We have to back up, reevaluate, get away from the corporate news and start going into the independent media sources like this, my magazine. There's a bunch of radio shows out there, YouTubes. If you get in there and do your work, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work to get out there and find out what's going on. And it takes a certain amount of courage, too. And that takes heart, which is actually courage is the French word for courage. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of determination, and a lot of will. And that's what we're missing in this world. You know, a lot of us, we know what to do. We know the right thing to do. We just don't have the will to do it. Apathy will be the thing that will bury us if we're not careful. So becoming an activist, doing events like this, talking to people, getting people to think. Like, I'm not necessarily wanting to tell somebody what to think. That's going to be up to them after they get the information. I just want people to think. Start thinking instead of just sitting around letting information come into you from a corporate media source and that all have an agenda. And we read our history books, but history is written by the victors. We have to remember this and start reaching out for new information and new ways to live and new ways to be. But what they found in biology is something really, really unique and really important, because if you want to know what's going on in the world and what is happening, what are we doing, it looks so chaotic. But there's something that happens in nature that can maybe clarify this a little bit. We all know about the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and we've just accepted that as a transformational analogy, a metaphor for our inner transformation. But what sciences have been doing lately is looking at right when the caterpillar, for unbeknownst reason to himself, starts hanging upside down and making a chrysalis. Now, inside that chrysalis is, if you open it up at a certain point, it's just goop. It's so chaotic that you would think there's no life form there at all, because it's complete chaos. But what they know now is they have imaginal cells strategically placed throughout that chaos. And those imaginal cells hold the pattern of the butterfly. And around those imaginal cells, they know now that all of the other cells start forming to it to form the butterfly. And I think the reason this is so important is because we are imaginal cells. What you're doing is an imaginal cell doing this, because you're creating not what was, not what is, but what you know can be. And if we all do this, we can create a better world by going inside, because we know that we can do something much, much better. We are imaginal cells that could be creating a much better world around us. And as we look at the chaos around us, remembering that that's the old caterpillar regime breaking down, and it should. Everything should break down at this point and reform itself into something completely new. So when somebody tells me, well, maybe we could fix this, no, we don't want to fix something that got us in this position in the first place. We have to really, really think about dismantling this whole thing we call our civilization and how we do things. Like if it's too big to fail, if it's too big to fail, it shouldn't even be. We need smaller units, smaller communities coming together and being more reliant on each other. So that's the imaginal cells. So I think that would probably do for what I have to say today. And if you want to know any more about us, lotusguide.com. And Michael always has a section in here where he writes about the Golden Road Television. And I always have a section, Rahasi Uncensored. The last one was, why should we be questioning our answers? It's easy. Almost all the answers we've ever been given, I'm old enough now to see that they're wrong. Everything I've been told by well-meaning parents, professors, teachers, priests, and preachers, and historians ends up not being the truth. And as we dig deeper, it gets dismantling and a little scary sometimes, but this is the adventure of being a spiritual warrior, a spiritual activist, and going out there and participating in life. So, thank you very much. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahasya. That was excellent. It's so important that we have alternative voices to listen to, because we need to question. We need to question everything. It's important for us to ask those questions, to keep our minds active. There's a lot of voices that we could listen to, and this is a complicated issue. We don't have anyone here speaking about health and wellness, or the importance of food that's grown well, and the links between those things. What type of food you eat, how healthy you are, how active your brain is. We had some cancellations due to illness and family emergencies. But we haven't had a lot of women voices up here either, or, people of color, and it's important.
Just listen with your heart. That's all we can do for each other, is just listen to each other with our hearts and communicate in compassion, because really there's no way to put spirit into words We're just trying to do it all the time, and our community needs as much compassion as it can. There's some very dark corners that need a lot of light and a lot of love. A lot of love and a lot of compassion. The Tower of Illusion falls mighty, 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 mighty crash. And we may fall with it, but we get back up again. And shake off the dust amid the rubble of yesterday's trouble. Gone, gone, gone. Only the sunrise of perfect peace remains. Yeah, remains. Stop, look, and listen. Allow the falling of the Tower of Illusion, and we shall dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Gone, 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 gone. Only the sunrise of perfect peace remains. Yeah, stop and look and listen. Allow the falling of illusion. Allow the falling of the Tower of Illusion, and we shall live in the Tower of the Most High. Yeah, 'cause gone, 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 gone. Only the sunrise of perfect peace remains.
Volcanoes in human history, though, is something that really got me interested when we were working on this. We've been through a lot of the technical stuff about how plate tectonics work, you know, subduction zones, and it comes back up. But what interested me was how we've lived with these things on this planet. And there are benefits, many benefits. You know, it creates islands. These big plume volcanoes with their basalts have created all of those islands, wonderful things, and they're still going on creating them. They don't last sometimes, they erode away when they stop erupting. It's interesting that the Hawaiian Islands themselves age, and it goes all the way up to little atolls in the Pacific that are eroding away. And they've all been built by these hot spots and islands that have been created. It created good gases for the atmosphere. There are people who think that most of the water on this planet was degassed over the millennia from volcanoes. It also, and other trace elements that enrich the soils is kind of interesting. If you get ash falls and tephra falls from volcanoes, it works pretty well as long as you don't get too much and it's not too hot. It's like everything else for everybody who gardens. You can kill all your plants with fertilizer pretty quickly if you get too carried away with it. And that is one of the problems. And of course, you've got the mountains. Scenery, water storage, they're beautiful. And I asked Bill Meese what he thought of when he thought of volcanoes, and he said subduction and skiing. And I thought, okay, well, that's pretty straightforward there. The hazards are what we hear about, though. And these can be big. And one of them, disruption of air and other transportation. Planes have a real problem flying through ash clouds. So far, they've been very lucky. Most of these 747s who've lost all of their engines have managed to restart them. It's interesting that the Redoubt volcano, which went off a few years ago, put in an ash cloud so big that it practically took down a 747 near El Paso, Texas, because it ran into parts of the ash cloud. These clouds are made up of glass fragments. They're not like ash you think of from your fireplace. And jets tend to take in a great deal of air, so they take a great deal of ash. So the FAA in the past few years has gotten much more aware of that and tries to warn planes do not fly through a volcanic ash cloud. Here we go. Eyjafjallajökull. I've been practicing. 2010 practically stopped air traffic in the northern hemisphere for quite a while. It was very disruptive. And this could happen again. Climate change. And it's documented throughout history, and I'll be talking about this a little more. The destruction of habitat, obviously, if you get pyroclastic flows and lava flows and things like that, they're going to destroy the land. And also, of course, it injures and kills human beings who get caught. The type of volcano matters in addition to size. You got the little cinder cones. They're messy. They rarely kill anybody. There was a poor farmer in Mexico, 1943. One came up in his cornfield. He was out there working. He said he knew there had been a warm spot in the cornfield, but it just started going. And it created quite a sizable cinder cone. They're not long-lived. They don't last very long. The shield volcanoes are the ones that construct Hawaiian Islands. Medicine Lake is a shield volcano. Newberry Volcano up in Oregon is a volcano. And they can explode too. The Medicine Lake area is full of these wonderful obsidian flows, which can go with explosive things. But generally they have hotter and more liquid lavas. The stratovolcanoes, such as our own Mount Shasta and the Cascades, they're gorgeous and they're hazardous. Rift zones can cause major long-term problems. Iceland sits on a rift zone where the plates are coming apart, the new magma's coming up. Iceland gets a double whammy. It's not only on a rift, it has a plume underneath it, which is why that's a lively area. They have good geothermal, but it can be a dangerous place too. Caldera eruptions are the big ones. That's Yellowstone and some of the others in history. And as I said, we've never really seen a big caldera eruption in human history. Toba erupted about 17,000 plus or minus a few years ago. It was big. This is the caldera, which is 30 by 100 kilometers. It was a whopper. It put out, they find the tephra and ash flow from Toba practically all over Asia and even into the Mideast. It was big. There is a theory that this was the genetic bottleneck that wiped out a lot of the humanoids on the planet at that time. At one point, we're finding there were different kinds of humans, the little hobbits, the Homo floresiensis, and all the different fossils they find in Africa of humans. And the theory is that a lot of them didn't, this is like Toba today, which is in Sumatra, by the way. It's one of the Indonesian volcanoes. They're very explosive. This is a genetic bottleneck. All those people on the left-hand side were there. They had a catastrophic event of some kind, which may have reduced humanity to 10,000 humans and wiped out some of the other sorts of humans. If any of you read about the Denisovans, and as I said, they didn't make it through the bottleneck. And very few of us did. And geneticists, for reasons, as I said, I'm not a geneticist, but they feel that this could have been one of the reasons that this happened and why humans are so very alike on the planet today, because we really are, despite our differences. And jumping ahead again to something, this one is one you see a lot about. Santorini Island in Greece really blew up. It was a big one in 1628 BCE. This might have been Atlantis, the origin of the Atlantis story. A civilization, the Minoans, who practically disappeared overnight. It was a whopper of an eruption. There was ash from that all over the Mediterranean. There were tsunamis set off by this, which they find traces of all over the Mideast. It possibly helped wipe out the Minoan civilization, which was one of the most advanced civilizations of the time. I keep thinking of something, Carl Sagan, for those of you who know who he is. He said at one time that if the Minoans had not been wiped out, we would now be sailing through the galaxy on spaceships. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Anyway, this is a wall painting from the city that was wiped out, and it's one of the earliest pictures of a harbor. Was this Atlantis? You know, there's the boats and the people going around, and there's a couple of kids, another fresco, and the elegantly dressed ladies who are sitting there chatting about something, but we don't know what, because even though they had writing, we have never deciphered their writing. It's kind of interesting. They find two forms of writing, and one of them we have deciphered turned out to be an early form of Greek. But the Minoan language, we don't even know what they call themselves. So it's kind of interesting. If you go to Crete, you can see their fabulous cities there. But what did they talk about and what did they say to each other? We don't know. Vesuvius, of course, is the one everybody thinks of when you think of a volcano. You've all seen the last days of Pompeii, you know, people clutching each other and gladiators. Probably that coast there was a real resort area for the Romans. They came over a lot and had a good time. A very good time, according to some of the wall frescoes. I was just telling Anne that I was looking at some of them thinking, wow, I didn't know people could do that. I was going to show some and I thought, no, it's probably not a good idea. But in 79 AD, for those of you who haven't seen the movies, Vesuvius there, which really had not been known to be a volcano. It was covered with vines, people were happy there, and it gave notice. They'd been having earthquakes there for several years, but people didn't really even realize it was a volcano. But it began after a lot of earthquakes and things like that. In August of 79, started with tephra flow and pyroclastic flows, and it wiped out Pompeii. This is the area where, if any of you heard, I'm trying to decide how detailed to get here. There was a gentleman named Pliny the Younger who wrote the first description of a really good volcano. He was with his mother over here in Misenum, which he watched the cloud come up and everything. His uncle was one of the admirals of the Roman fleet who decided to take his fleet to see what he could do and go rescue people. Well, he found out he couldn't land anywhere along here because the ash was so bad and the pyroclastics. So he went down here to Stabiae, and he had a heart attack and died, which is kind of sad, but anyway, they did several TV series about things like that. For years, they thought that the people in Herculaneum had survived. They didn't find any bodies. Sadly enough, a few years ago, they found hundreds of them huddled in boathouses along the beach who had died pretty horribly. Hopping forward a little, we get into the Dark Ages. And this is an interesting one because they blame practically everything in the world on the Dark Ages and this era. Something did happen during this time. There were hundreds of written stories about the sun was cold. The Chinese said we couldn't see the sky clearly enough to plan, you know, we didn't know what date it was. Astronomers were getting killed because they couldn't tell the emperor what the exact date was, and they're saying we can't see the star Canopus because of the fog and cloud. Something major happened in those days. There was famine, severe winters in Europe, and plague, which some people say the movement of people at that time was so extreme, and with them they brought their fleas. And there was a huge depopulation of the Eastern Roman Empire. Justinian was the emperor at that time. He caught the plague, nearly died, and Theodora did, his wife. And also a time of religious uprising, the rise of the Islamic states, just a total disruption. And because we have two volcanoes, and this is one in El Salvador, they just started discovering a few years ago, was a biggie. It had ash all over the place. They find samples of ash from this place in both polar ice caps. So that suggests that was a big one. El Salvador itself was covered under ash, and it's also said that it was responsible for a lot of the migration of the Mayan people and upheavals in Central America with the big civilizations that they had there. The other suspicion one is Krakatoa. And there are a lot of reports that it did something big in those days. Mainly this comes from ash that they found and Chinese writings about something going on down there. Krakatoa, of course, is famous for, it's not east of Java, by the way. As the movie said, it's actually kind of southwest. But Krakatoa, of course, went off in 1883 in one of the biggest eruptions that we've ever seen. And it got a lot of publicity, and it still does. This is Iceland, which, as I said, is not lucky. They are on a rift, plus they have a plume. So it's very, very active in Iceland. The Icelanders, so I hear from my friend Susie Boyd, who visited, are very, very good with geothermal energy, that's a plus because they get it from there. On the other hand, their volcanoes are very active. They had a major eruption in 1783, which killed almost all their animals, 1 in 10 humans there. It created crop failures, dry fogs throughout Europe. Benjamin Franklin, who happened to be in France at the time, asking for help with our revolution, was one of the first people who actually tied what was going on in Europe with the dry fogs and the cold summers and warm winters, which sounds like it wouldn't be bad, but it was, especially for crops. Lots of famine. But he was the first one who said, I think it's because of that Icelandic volcano. And it's kind of interesting to think that there's an American there. Iceland, as I said, is a rift. And you hear about a lot of, well, Eyjafjallajökull is one of the Icelandic volcanoes. It has several that have gone off, and they can get very nasty. They put a lot of sulfur and other things into the atmosphere, which is not good. The Westman Islands, which are down there, I have my handy dandy pointer. A few years ago, they had a major eruption, which was threatening to close one of the only fishing ports they had. And they tried to stop it, and this is where they put water on it. They got all the boats they could, millions of gallons of seawater. It may have helped, no one's really sure, but you've got to give them points for trying. And actually, eventually the eruption did stop, and they came up with a better harbor than they had before. So you got to hand it to the Icelanders, but the area there's Hekla, which is one of the more dangerous volcanoes that they have, and this is Eyjafjallajökull. Part of the thing is Iceland has a lot of ice, as you may guess, and it melts, which causes a lot of lahars, which does a lot of damage to people if you can't get out of the way. This is Tambora. Now, Tambora went off in 1815. It killed, in the area, probably around 90,000 people right off. It was densely populated, and nobody in 1815 in Sumatra, really, they didn't have a census, you could just sort of guess. The results of this one, too, were pretty dramatic worldwide. It was a big one. It put out a lot of ash, put a lot of sulfur in the area. In the United States, they call that the year without summer. And the crops failed in the US. This is just the immediate ash fall from Tambora. The worldwide ash fall was there, plus the sulfur it puts in the atmosphere creates a haze, which helps block the sun, which has interesting effects in different areas, and I'm not going to go into that too much, but it is funny that some areas got hotter summers and some of them didn't. But in the United States, they called it the year without summer. Here's a comparison of the ash falls of these things, which I think kind of interesting. This is Pinatubo, which some of us may remember in 1991. And this is Tambora in 1815. This is the Toba that happened 17,000 years ago that may have helped wipe out all the other humanoid species except us. Okay, let's get around to serious matters here. How can we be killed in a volcanic eruption? It can be fast, a pyroclastic flow, mud flow, or a traffic accident. Seriously, fleeing, they had, especially at Pinatubo years ago, lots of people died in traffic accidents. People panic and you can't see, and evacuating a great number of people, especially when they're very nervous and upset, can lead to things like this. You could die slowly from burns, injuries, and starvation, or you can die very slowly if civilization as we know it breaks down, which could happen too, especially if you can't get relief to people. Suddenly, it's an interesting issue. Here are the major disasters of the past, and these were immediate death tolls from the eruption. Tambora, at least 60,000, probably 90,000. In Krakatoa, 36,000. That was mostly from the tsunamis. Krakatoa was a series of islands that really blew up, and it collapsed into itself and sent huge tsunamis to the surrounding area in Java and Sumatra, densely populated areas, low relief, and people just had no idea that this was going to be happening there. Mount Pelée and Martinique, I'll be talking about more, 30,000 people. Nevado del Ruiz in Colombia, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, 22,000. Laki in Iceland, I mentioned that, 10,000. And Vesuvius in Italy, 79, mainly in Pompeii. They're not too sure about that one because they haven't excavated part of that area and they don't know who's there.
Penny?
Yes?
What does CE stand for?
Christian era. I'm sorry.
Oh, like AD.
AD. CE is generally the commonly used one now. Anyway, this is a stratovolcano, which is generally what we keep talking about. There are lots of ways that can be dangerous. The main ones are the pyroclastic flows and the mud flows. The other ones, the ashfall, if you get enough of that, it collapses your roof because eventually it's heavy. The eruption cloud, it can bring down airplanes, etc. And if the gases that are in here get in, especially sulfur, get into the prevailing wind in the atmosphere, they can stay up for years and help block sunlight. Plus there's an old rhyme, Mary had a little lamb, she doesn't anymore, because what was once pure H2O is H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid. The other thing many of these volcanoes put out is fluorine and gases like that, chlorine, which if you get a lot of ashfall, it concentrates in the pastures and it kills the animals. That's what happened a great deal in Iceland, and it's a hazard from any kind of ashfall. So this is Mount Rainier. This is a mud flow from the Emmons Glacier that happened many years ago, but you can see the impact. Mount Rainier is a problem because it's big and high, and it gets a lot of precipitation, so it's got a lot of ice on it, as our own mountain often does. And when the volcanoes get going, it melts and comes down. Avalanche Gulch is called Avalanche Gulch for a reason, because these things happen. And the mud flows, I think many of us are familiar with here that have happened over the years. This is Nevado del Ruiz in Colombia. And in 1985, it was a small eruption. It wasn't even terribly big, but it was covered with ice and snow at the time. And this is one that should not have killed anybody. But it was Colombia, and they weren't quite sure what to do. They were working on hazard maps. There were not a lot of scientists at that time. They had asked for assistance from the United States, and they had several geologists packed to leave to go to Colombia to help them with this. Then they had an incident in Bogota where the rebels broke into one of the government offices and started killing people. So the United States did not send any geologists. So they were left with their own resources, and they didn't have a lot of them at that time. This set off a mud flow. And you can see this is Antes before, the city of Armero. And over there is after the mud flow. And the sad part is they should have had at least an hour and a half, maybe more, warning that this was coming. People knew something was happening, but they didn't know what to do. And the mayor of the town, as how so often happens, is saying, nothing's going to happen, don't worry about it. So everybody goes to bed that night in Armero, and a lot of them died. There's another picture of what it looked like after the mud flow went through. This is a hazard map that they prepared later that shows the volcano there. And this is where the rivers. And that's Armero, one of the cities that got wiped out. And this is Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is famous for mud flows. They've had 60 major ones in the last 10,000 years. They had a huge one, 5,000, 6,000 years ago that went all the way to Puget Sound. There are a lot of cities there that are built on these mud flows. And some of them do have plans in store. They have, I've seen some where they have plans to, the sirens go off, you go up the hill, because that's what you want to do if you're having a mud flow. Don't try to go up, do not go down river, because that's probably not going to be a good idea. Go up. And in many cases, just 20 feet might save your life. But this is, Mount Rainier is notorious for these, and these can happen kind of unexpectedly. You don't really need an eruption sometimes to have these happen. This is a pyroclastic flow from St. Helens, and I think all of us watched the videos of that going, the bulge and everything like that. St. Helens was interesting because it started making noises in March of 1980. They started having a lot of earthquakes, and it got the attention of a lot of scientists, including the U.S. Geological Survey, who are the creme de la creme of the geologic world, and they started monitoring it. No one had ever really seen a Cascade volcano go off, and despite monitoring the earthquakes and the gases and things like that, it was like, what's going to happen? We're not sure. Plus, they ran into a lot of political problems. And I don't know if anybody has followed that. There were people who claimed, of course, it was all a plot by the USGS to get more funding. There were people who said that they had been planning a big development at Spirit Lake, where good old Harry Truman lived, and that this was a plot to keep that from happening. The volcano kept shaking, and more people kept coming to monitor it. Plus, they had huge numbers of tourists. Busloads of them. It was really popular. It was becoming the local industry. And as the volcano kept shaking, and finally, on March 27th, it blew. Not heavily, but enough to look scenic and entertaining. People wanted to get near the volcano, and the geologists were trying to outline an area where you shouldn't go. But people weren't believing them. It was like, wait a minute, I own land up there, it's my property, blah, blah, blah. And you had old Harry Truman, if any of you remember him, this was the old guy in his 80s who had a lodge at Spirit Lake, and he was not going to leave. He became kind of a folk hero, and it's kind of sad. I often wonder if he would have left if he hadn't become so publicly a hero. It's like he couldn't back down at that point. But he said he knew a secret mine shaft he was going to stay in, and that the volcano wouldn't hurt him anyway. After all the hassle, it kept going on and on and on, and Weyerhaeuser wanted to get in there and log, and people wanted to get in there, and the scientists were saying, we just don't think this is a good idea. And they're like, well, when's it going to blow? We're not sure. Here are two scientists, one of whom I actually knew. The observation post that they set up at Coldwater Ridge was about 5-6 miles from the volcano. They knew it was dangerous. In fact, the geologist who was in charge of that didn't feel comfortable having people sitting there observing the volcano. He asked for television equipment to be put there. It would have cost $40,000. He was denied. So he had to put an observer there. And the usual observer was a gentleman on the right named Harry Glickett, who was working on his PhD. But he had to go to UCSB, which happens to be where I went to school, to talk with his advisors. So for one night, David Johnston, who's the gentleman on the left, took his place on Coldwater Ridge. And that happened to have been the night of May 18th, 1980. So that night, David Johnston was killed. The mountain blew royally. It set off a lateral blast out to the side, which no one had really expected. And there were at least 57 other people who died that day. There might have been more. Nobody really knew how many people were in the area because people were just gleefully going off on logging roads and going to take pictures, and they didn't believe the scientists anyway. Anyway, Mount St. Helens blew, and there it is afterwards. Harry Glicken was just desolate at the loss of his friend David Johnston, and he felt guilty because he said it should have been me. He went on to study geology for years, and he specialized in volcanoes and pyroclastic flows. He eventually got together with a couple named Katja and Maurice Kraft. If you have seen volcano films, especially up close, it's quite likely they took them. This was a couple who were very dedicated, took all kinds of risks. They made many wonderful films. They died at Mount Unzen, Japan, with Harry Glicken and 40 other people in a pyroclastic flow. They guessed wrong. They didn't think they had an observation point they thought was going to be safe. It wasn't. They died there. Why this hits me now is one of the films they did on pyroclastic flows was used by geologists at Mount Pinatubo in 1991. USGS people went over to help the Philippines in 1991 when it looked like this volcano was going off. And they were stationed at Clark Air Force Base. And they were having a terrible time convincing the Air Force and the Philippine government that something was going to happen at Mount Pinatubo. They started doing research around the base, and they were saying, wait a minute, this is a dangerous place. There's tons of tephra. It looks like we've had pyroclastic flows here. And they were like, where from? They weren't even sure Pinatubo was, still active. It was, and it really started kicking up. To convince the people at Clark Air Force Base, especially the hard-headed military, excuse me, darling, that something could happen, they showed the Kraft films. And they showed them to everybody. They showed them to the mayors of the people around. And as this volcano just kept shaking and getting wilder and wilder, they finally got people to evacuate. Clark Air Force Base was evacuated, and the surrounding areas were evacuated. They got the airplanes, planes and stuff like that out of Clark Air Force Base. They really had a fight with the Philippines too, because at that time, the US was negotiating for Subic Bay and Clark Air Force Base. And there were a lot of people in the Philippines who were opposed to this. They just wanted, us out. And when the geologists kept saying something's going to happen, of course, the rumor was they're just doing this because they want better terms to negotiate. But eventually, thank heavens, they got some people, and when Mount Pinatubo blew, and it was big, and very few people were killed, most of them from staying in their houses, which collapsed due to the weight of the tephra. So it's an interesting story how all of these things hook together. They were also lucky enough that many of the geologists who had been at Mount St. Helens were at Mount Pinatubo, and they had seen this, they knew what could happen. Also, the lead geologist there had been in the Peace Corps in the Philippines in 1970. He spoke the language and was married to a Filipina, so he was able to relate to things. So it was just the circumstances that came together there that really helped the situation. Pinatubo was also one of the first monitored by satellite and other things to really tell about the worldwide atmosphere. It did lower temperatures on the planet, not by a lot, but by enough to be noticed, and caused haze in many areas. That's a famous photograph. Running away, that looks like something from Dante's Peak, which was a pretty good movie, actually. They made it. Okay. This is the sample again. We have never seen in human history anything like this. Those are the biggies. We haven't seen them. We know they've happened because we have traces of them. We know they were big, and we know they're dangerous. For example, Long Valley Caldera, which is Mammoth Mountain and that whole beautiful area over there, really blew. 730,000 before the Christian era. This is the major ashfall from that, which would create quite a problem for everybody concerned. This is Mount St. Helens ash in 1980, and I think a lot of us remember seeing film strips from this and whatever, and I think we even had some here. The Long Valley Caldera, their ash was there. Okay. Yellowstone, the ash falls from the 3 different eruptions we have tracked there. This is it. And that's just the big ash fall. As I said, we have never seen really what one of these would do. We can speculate, we can do computer modeling of them, which we've done, but we've never really seen one happen in human history. And Yellowstone continues to shake and go up and down. It could do this for millennia. We simply don't know. And this is interesting because Indonesian volcanoes, there's Toba up at the top, which was the biggie that went off about 70,000 years ago. There's Krakatoa, which killed 36,000 people in the beaches there. There's Tambora, which was big in 1815. And this is Mount Agung. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this properly. It is in Bali, and it's been in the news lately quite a bit. And the interesting part about that at the moment is it could kill a lot of people, and it has before. And they've been evacuating, but it's just kind of still just kind of steaming and shaking. And from what I've been hearing lately, people are starting to go back now. They've had several of the local priests who've been climbing the mountain and throwing offerings in to shut it down. Who knows? I have no idea. I'm not going to speculate on whether that might work or not. So far, it has not really blown. That's where it is on Bali. It's caused a lot of disruption and a lot of loss in tourists, which of course is always an impact when a volcano starts to act up. What's this going to do to us economically? Years ago, was it Mount Soufriere? They evacuated so many people, and the mountain really didn't blow. It just kind of fiddled around, but it destroyed the economy of a lot of these areas. And there's Mount Agung as it went off. I was following that one thinking something might happen. Okay, the volcano story that got to me when I was researching this is in Martinique, which is over here. There's the Caribbean there. Martinique is a small island, and actually it's quite famous as being the birthplace of 3 interesting women, one of whom was the Empress Josephine, who married Napoleon, one of whom was a woman named Françoise de Bigny, who became the quiet wife of Louis XIV, and the other one was a woman named Amie de Riveri, who was captured by pirates and went on to become the Sultana of Turkey, which is kind of an interesting from a little island in the Caribbean. Okay, Martinique was considered a really desirable place to live in the French. Saint-Pierre was their biggest city right here. The capital was at Fort-de-France, which had about 20,000 people. Saint-Pierre had about 30,000 people, but in the surrounding area they had a lot of little plantations and things like that, and it was considered generally a pretty desirable place to live. Starting in this is a picture of, this is Saint-Pierre in 1880s. Behind it is their volcano, Mount Pelée, and it had erupted in the past, but it hadn't done anything particularly interesting. It was scenic, they thought, and people used to climb it all the time and have parties up there. There were lakes and whatever. It's really not very tall. There's also an interesting story about an Italian captain who pulled into the port at Saint-Pierre to unload rum, or load rum, because rum was their big export. And halfway through, he looked up at Mount Pelée and said, "If Vesuvius looked like your volcano, I'd get out of Naples." And he was going to leave. Some of the local customs officials went out to his boat and said, "We are not leaving. You know, you're going to finish loading." And the captain said, "You're going to swim because you're not staying on my ship because I'm leaving." And he did. Well, he was smart because the next morning, it was Ascension Day, Mount Pelée shot off a pyroclastic flow, and it killed everyone in the city in about 4 or 5 minutes. including the governor and his wife, and 4 members of the scientific commission who'd gone over there to look. This is the city after the pyroclastic flow went through. And it was pretty shocking to almost the world because they'd never seen anything like this before. There were many scientific, actually, they learned a lot from this tragedy. Scientists from all over the world went to Martinique. The mountain shot off a few more pyroclastic flows. They were able to observe them. But it did have a terrible death toll. This man was one of the 2 survivors. He was in an underground, there's his prison today. It was an underground solitary confinement. He was an illiterate gentleman. They're not sure what his name was. They used to call him Samson because he was a big, strong guy. But they think his name was Auguste Parras. They didn't know what he did because all of the records were gone. He survived St. Pierre and went on to join the Barnum and Bailey Circus. This is a true story, as an exhibit, pretty much. The interesting part is after it blew, there were a lot of refugees in the northern part of Martinique, and they all streamed down into Fort-de-France. And Fort-de-France was 20,000 people, and suddenly there were thousands of these refugees coming, including 2,000 from a place called Morne Rouge, which was just on the edge of St. Pierre and had not really been that much affected. Well, it became such a burden to the people who were down there. They were giving them supplies and housing, but the people who were there were complaining because they're getting more than we are. So finally, the governor, the new governor, because the old one had died, the lieutenant governor, orders 2,000 people to go back to Morne Rouge, which is a place just outside of St. Pierre. Go back or we're going to cut off any assistance to you. So these people, 2,000 of them, went back to Morne Rouge. A few weeks later, there was another pyroclastic flow, which killed them. And one of the people there was Father Mary, and he had been one of the ones who helped save Ludger or Auguste or whatever his name happened to be. Father Mary was the parish priest there. He was very loved and very popular. There's a picture of him. I really don't know much more about him. I wish I did. He was horribly burned in that pyroclastic flow, and he was taken back to Fort-de-France, and they took him to a nunnery hospital there where he was being carefully cared for. No one wanted to tell him that those 2,000 people had died. And finally, one of the sisters, he demanded to know, and she said, "I'm sorry, Father, they all died." The story is that Father Mary turned his head to the wall and said, "I must tend my flock," and he died. That story gets me. It's one of those stories you hear, you don't know if it's true. From what they know of the man, it well may have been true. But it shows the kind of humans that get involved in these things, and the brave, kind ones who stay to help, and the cowardly ones like the governor. Now, here we go. Getting back to local stuff. This is a painting done of what it possibly would look like if Shastina decided to blow. And here is the current USGS hazard area for what might happen to us. And as you can see, in the purple, it could be lava flows, pyroclastic flows, thick tephra, lahars and mud flows. And the areas around it would get regional lava flows and things like that. There are some other ones. This is from mud flows, and as you can see, they tend to follow low areas, Cascade Gulch and other things like that. Diller Canyon, which is pretty distinctive to this day. Here are possible lava flows. The Mount Shasta lava flows are very thick and very high. I mean, you can see that wonderful one when you're driving down 97, you drive right past the edge of it. They tend not to go terribly far, and you can outrun them very easily. This is a pyroclastic flows for the last 10,000 years, As Dr. Hurt once said, the only way to survive one of these is to be somewhere else. And as you know, they also go downhill. So all things considered, don't run to Dunsmuir if you think that's going to happen. Go the other way. This is in the last 10,000 years. Mount Shasta, as we know, has been pretty quiet for the last 10,000 years or so. There may have been minor eruptions. There probably was not an eruption with La Perouse, as we all talk about the French sailor who said he thought he saw Mount Shasta from the ocean, which Bill Meese has pretty thoroughly refuted in his material. And here's another hazard map of what could happen. Depends on the way the wind's blowing. This should be familiar to you. Here's Mount Shasta, of course, and you can see Black Butte over there to the right, and the Shasta Valley. For years, geologists did not figure out what was going on there. They had all of these little hillocks, which were made of volcanic material, but they were all turned around in different directions, and nobody knew quite what to make of them. How did this happen? This is Mount St. Helens. And suddenly people are saying, wait a minute, there was this big landslide followed by a lateral blast. And here we go. So we feel pretty sure that about 350 to 400,000 years ago, the sand flat cone, which was Mount Shasta at that time, lost a huge portion of its mass. It came down through the Shasta Valley, almost up to Wairika. We drive through it all the time, and that's where all those little hillocks came from. It's probably one of the biggest landslides we've ever found. The interesting part about that one, at least to today, is they don't think it caused an eruption. In other words, the magma chamber was not exposed, as it was on Mount St. Helens when they had that big landslide there. The magma chamber was exposed and it came out. They don't think that happened. This one, they can't decide it was an earthquake or just mass wasting, because that does happen. The future of Mount Shasta. This is Mount Zama, or Crater Lake as we know it today. It could blow up and become a caldera. It's possible. The other possibility, which they've just found, is it could end up like Rainbow Mountain, which was a big stratovolcano about 1 million years ago, part of the Cascades, which has just simply eroded away. It stopped erupting, it stopped providing new things, and over the years, the glaciation and just plain old erosion has taken it down to this. You can see it from the road over by Deer Mountain. You can still see it's kind of low hills and kind of a peaceful end for a volcano. People worry, obviously, when they come here, and that's one of the questions we get here at the museum a lot, is when is Mount Shasta going to explode again? Well, we don't know. It's not likely, at least not immediately, but it's very well monitored. This is the current monitoring stations, and if you are so interested, you can go online to the USGS Cascades Observatory for California. You can pull up this, and you can click on the seismometers or the GPS stations, which show if the mountain's expanding or not, or getting ready to blow.
Follow the golden road, follow the golden road, follow, 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 follow the golden road. We're off to see the Golden Road TV show. You'll find it is a whiz of a show, if ever a show there was. It's arts and culture and history, environment, health, technology, and peace and justice, science, just because of the meaningful things it does. We're off to see the Golden Road TV show.